for joining the second GEO-GEE Programme virtual meetup focused on biodiversity and climate change. I'm Sam Atkinson, General Manager of EO Data Science, and I will be your host. EO Data Science is an Australian company specialising in operationalising Earth observations to answer specific questions. We're fortunate to have an excellent working relationship with the Google Earth Engine team, and we're even more fortunate to be providing support to the GEO-GEE Programme. Our vision for these meetups is focused on similar or overlapping themes to share knowledge, ask questions of each other, and to build professional networks. Travel and conferences are nearly impossible due to COVID, but we want to enable as much sharing of ideas as we possibly can in an online environment. With this objective in mind, the structure of this meetup is like a panel discussion. Each of our projects will present for 5 minutes with 2 minutes of questions and answers. Then we will take the opportunity to ask as many questions of the panelists as possible in a moderated conversation. If you want to ask a question, and really I encourage you to for everybody listening, use the comments box under the presentation, and we'll pick up those questions, ask them of the panelists, and try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. And really, I think it's important that it's your questions being put to the panelists instead of mine. I think yours will be much more interesting and relevant to answering the questions that all of you people listening will hopefully find relevant to the projects you're working on. Now, the GEO-GEE Programme has an amazing global reach with projects on every continent, including one presentation today on Antarctica. And in these meetups, we are celebrating the diversity of objectives and methods, perspectives, and definitely people that you can only get with a global conversation. So as we engage in this discussion, I feel it is this diversity that offers us all the greatest opportunity to learn and share knowledge. To enable networking from these events, please look at the speaker and attendee bios that you would have received a link to in the invite for this meetup. If you haven't created your own bio and want to, you still can. If there is a bio you see and you want to talk to that person, please reach out to them, exchange ideas, and build your professional networks. In this meetup, our presenters and panelists are Amanda Armstrong from the University of Virginia, presenting on Essential Biodiversity Values Scale-Up, or EBV Scale-Up. Marie Schellens from the UN Environment Programme in Brussels, presenting on STRATA, Earth Stress Monitor. Iván González-Garzón from Northern Arizona University, presenting on Ecological Integrity Index. Glenn Moncrieff from the South African Environmental Observation Network, presenting on continuous change detection for an open ecosystem with complex natural dynamics. Elkin Noguera from the Institute Humboldt in Colombia, presenting on the BioModelos project. And Stef Lhermitte from Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, presenting on ice shelf monitoring. We're also pleased to have Doug Cripe, who is the Senior Scientific Advisor at GEO, and Noel Gorelick, who is a Senior Engineer from the Google Earth Engine team, join with us. Noel, would you like to say some words from Google's perspective?
Sure, thanks. Hi, I'm Noel Gorelick. I'm one of the co-founders of Google Earth Engine. We here at Google are excited to be able to provide the platform to support these projects. I'm here today as an observer, trying to spot places where we might be able to improve the Earth Engine infrastructure to help unblock work on these projects, or to provide technical support if Sam and the EO data science team run into trouble. With that said, I'm looking forward to learning about each project, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Noel. Doug, would you like to say some words from GEO's perspective?
Hi, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so I'm pleased to be here. Again, my name is Doug Cripe. I'm a senior scientist at the Secretariat for GEO, the Group on Earth Observations. And since this is a GEO Google Earth Engine project or program, I just wanted to tell you a bit about GEO so that you can be a little bit informed of the context and how this came about. So GEO is the Group on Earth Observations, and the best way to think about it is a global partnership of governments and organizations that envision a future where decisions and actions for the benefit of humankind are informed by coordinated, comprehensive, and sustained Earth observations. Next slide, please. So GEO has a mission, and that mission is to connect the demand for sound and timely environmental information with the supply of data and information about the Earth that's collected through observing systems and made available by the GEO community. And in so doing, GEO works to unlock the power of Earth observations by facilitating their accessibility and application to global decision-making within and across many different domains. So GEO has been in existence since 2005. There are over 100 member governments that participate in GEO. And again, as a partnership, it is a non-binding best efforts mechanism that brings together these countries to discuss Earth observations and how to make them available and usable. And when we talk about Earth observations, we mean all observing platforms. We're not just talking about remotely sensed, but also in situ, marine, aircraft, and so forth. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the projects, and back to you, Sam.
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be working with GEO on this program, and yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. So now onto the presentations. I'm really excited about these presentations, having had a sneak peek previously, and of course having worked and learned about each of these projects over the past few months. First, we have Amanda Armstrong from the University of Virginia presenting on essential or EBV scale up. Over to you, Amanda.
EBV Scale Up, as Sam said. This project is led by Robert Gorelick and Karsten Meyer. And this team aims to harness the power of Google Earth Engine and GeoBond to bring essential biodiversity variables from concept to application-ready global solutions in service of society. Next slide, please. So Project EBV Scale Up will enhance a suite of complementary EBV products to application-ready time series products integrating terrestrial and aquatic marine habitats. The table here breaks down the focus or EBV class, EBV metric, area of interest, and resolution for each team's products within this group. Together, our products will advance scientific understanding of EBV classes that fall within each of the three components of biodiversity: composition, structure, and function, as shown in this figure by Nass in 1990 at the right. So now I will give a brief overview of each group's project within this consortium that together makes up the EBV Scale-Up team. Next slide, please. Okay, so this project with myself, Domingo Alcaraz-Segura, and Howard Epstein uses Google Earth Engine to develop a tool and workflow to classify global ecosystem functional diversity using MODIS 13Q and Landsat at 250-meter resolution for the MODIS, and it's the EVI product. So our project's objectives include to develop and implement a processing stream in Google Earth Engine for the production of ecosystem functional types and ecosystem functional diversity variables for the terrestrial biosphere at 200-meter resolution, as I said, using MODIS 13Q. Here we show examples of EFT classification for both the circumpolar Arctic tundra at the top right and temperate South America at the center left, as well as EFD in northern Alaska, and that EFD is ecosystem functional diversity. Our second objective is to assess the interannual dynamics of EFT and EFD through the global biosphere over the MODIS record. For example, an example of this is shown for the Yamal Peninsula at the far right. And thirdly, to assess the conservation priority or the vulnerability of areas based on properties of EFD and their dynamics over time. This has already been done for the Baja Peninsula, as shown at the center right, and is an ongoing effort in the circumpolar Arctic tundra. And in the interest of time, I won't read our project's deliverables, but they're shown here at the bottom. And we have 4, and they are spanning all of the different objectives and maps and things like that. So next slide, please. All right, so Robert Gorelick and Brian Stuckey's effort will develop global species phenology traits. So the end goal here is to create spatially gridded quantitative statistical summaries of phenological characteristics of multiple plant species, focusing initially on the Northern Hemisphere. Phenological characteristics will include estimates of the start, peak, and termination of leafing and flowering. The image on the left of the slide depicts about 14 million raw phenological observations in the United States, with the potential to generate 2 to 5-fold more of an amount, given increasing citizen science data resources. The image on the right visualizes how these observations could be converted into a gridded data product after filtering by a number of observations per grid cell to infer large-scale phenological patterns. Using these gridded data, we can utilize presence-only or presence-absent models or a fusion of them to estimate phenometrics over species by grid cell by year combinations. And again, the deliverables for this part of the project are included at the bottom. So next slide, please. Karsten Meyer and Ruben Remolgado are working on GEO-GEE, a project which maps the global annual extents of terrestrial, freshwater, and coastal ecosystem types. Extents of these natural ecosystems are changing due to various pressures with impacts on both species and humans alike. Environmental policies, for example, within the CBD and SDGs, need global monitoring of ecosystem status and trends. Examples for policies that would benefit from annual monitoring of ecosystem extents would be some of the headline indicators proposed for the post-2020 framework of the CBD. The GEO-GEE time series product depicts annual extents and changes of about 60 ecosystem types. These 60 ecosystem types include natural and semi-natural classes like seasonal river, swamp forest, etc., but also artificial classes like plantation, pasture land, mining site, and more. They have already mapped these classes via deductive rule sets using some 30 input data sets and around 60 derived variables that together define these ecosystem classes. The figures at the bottom show 3 regional examples of transitions between different ecosystems that have occurred. C at the right shows the Sahel, where tropical dry grasslands have advanced over deserts, likely reflecting climate-driven desert greening. Further south, those grasslands gains were partially offset by conversion of grasslands to cropland. In B, along the Finno-Russian border, large areas of freshwater wetland have receded to boreal forest, possibly reflecting northward advancing of tree cover under warming climates. And A, at the left, at the northern shores of the Caspian Sea, the area of permanent and seasonal saline water of the Caspian Sea is declining due to increasing evaporation. These losses, however, gave way to increasing areas of saline wetlands and seasonal lakes. So finally, this project will use the power of Google Earth Engine to enhance GEO-GEE, the beta version, through downscaling important components, quality assurance, enabling future updates, and by improving accessibility and outreach. Next slide, please. Can we back up one? Interesting. Okay. The Seascape Identity, Extent, and Diversity as Ecosystem Structure EBVs project by Enrique Montes, Frank Muller-Karger, and Maria Cavanaugh, also Joaquin Chunanes, aims to use satellite seascape classifications operationally generated by NOAA Coast Watch to produce ecosystem structure EBVs with global coverage. The GEE environment will allow computation of seascape habitat richness and diversity for the global ocean and for selected regions of interest on the fly. Satellite seascapes are computed using an unsupervised machine learning algorithm that classifies dynamic fields of satellite and modeled data. The technique uses 7 input variables, including sea surface temperature, sea surface salinity, absolute dynamic topography from the multi-sensor altimetry, microwave sea ice, and ocean color products from the Aquamodus sensor. The classification model is built from 2 different types of machine learning algorithms. First, a probabilistic self-organizing mapping algorithm that classifies the input data into 225 classes. And second, a hierarchical agglomerative clustering algorithm that groups seascapes at the global scale within the initial classification model to a minimum until 90 to 95% of the variance of input data remains. And next slide, please. Finally, Florencia Sandromano's group at Clark University is working on a project to characterize global changes in vegetation phenology. In the map, the color composite presents trends in mean annual NDVI in red, trends in the magnitude of the annual cycle in green, and in blue, trends in the magnitude of a semi-annual cycle, which controls the shape of the seasonal curve. Areas in light gray have been masked because their NDVI is very low, or less than about 0.15. Areas in dark gray have no significant trend. All other colored areas on the land characterize trends that are significant for more of the seasonal shape parameters using the contextual Mann-Kendall test of significance. Thus, areas that are bright magenta, for example, are experiencing significantly increasing trends in mean annual NDVI and in the magnitude of the annual cycle. This project will develop phenology EBVs using time series of remotely sensed vegetation productivity. These EBVs will measure global changes in the nature, prevalence, and spatial distribution of vegetation seasonality by mapping changes in the amplitude of seasons over time, as well as the timing of the seasons. Providing information on interannual changes in vegetation productivity, these EBVs will allow monitoring changes in biological processes associated with them, such as arrival time and success of migratory species. Changes in vegetation phenology can be the result of a transient response or an anomalous dry year or follow a progressive trend. Therefore, the project will set the baseline for future monitoring of deviations from normal conditions. And again, the deliverables for this project are included on the left and involve mapping and products that are made available to the wider community. So that's all I have. Thanks very much for having me. And as I said, this is a consortium of a whole bunch of different projects and scientists. So I'll do my very best to answer questions on any of these different projects. But if I can't, I will be happy to put you in touch with those who can. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks. Yes, you've done very well to summarise what is a very large body of work from a lot of people into 5 minutes. So thank you.
I'll do my best.
No, it's great. I remember the first time we met with your team a few months ago to do the introduction. It blew my mind how many people, but also how many very talented and experienced scientists are working in that. So it must be very exciting for you to be part of. So with the kind of the global scope of so many of the aspects of EBV scale up, I assume computation is an issue that you are grappling with, thinking about a lot, just in terms of how do you do these computations at the global scale. Do you have any kind of advice or learnings to share with other people who are attempting similar massive data computation tasks?
Yeah, so at least for our group, with a lot of us doing global products, yes, we constantly run up against just the framework and what can be done computationally in Google Earth Engine. And I think some of the solutions that we've been able to implement so far have involved streamlining code and making sure that the way in which we are going about calculating what we're trying to calculate is the most efficient way and uses the least amount of computational power, if possible. In other areas, I think somewhat too with Google Earth Engine, I'm sure Noel can tell you that there has been a lot of advancements over the past 6 months. They're progressing constantly with respect to how different the servers and things behind the scene are tethered together. And so I've found that sometimes it depends on the time of day that I'm trying to use Google Earth Engine and who else might be online and what they might else be doing. Sometimes I've had to piecemeal out the code a bit. And I think another thing that has been really, really helpful, at least for our group, is to get into the Google Earth Engine forum community, the developers forum, and ask questions. Because sometimes the way that we think we're doing it isn't actually the most efficient way.
Yeah, excellent. That's very good advice there. Just one more quick question. I'll try and squeeze as many as I can. just a question from Doug Cripe from GEO. How many total EBVs are there, kind of as identified by GeoBond and MBond? And how many of those are being kind of tackled by your project?
So I wish I knew that. I have lost count. I've lost track of how many there are. Yeah, I'd have to pull the crew, and I could look it up and put it in the chat when I find it, if that's helpful.
No, that's good. I think suffice to say, there are a lot, and you guys are tackling quite a few of them, probably at least half a dozen from what we counted just then. Excellent, Amanda. Thank you so much for that. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the panel discussion. If anybody watching this has questions for Amanda, please put them in the comments, and we can ask them of Amanda and representing the EBV team in the panel session later. So thank you, Amanda. Our next presenter is Marie Schellens from the UN Environment Programme, presenting on STRATA, an Earth stress monitor. Over to you, Marie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for hosting this session. We at UNEP are very excited to present our project, STRATA, the Earth stress monitor here, and we're very grateful to the GEO-GEE initiative in supporting us in these efforts, geospatially, technically, but also with knowledge support. So STRATA is a product, next slide, please. STRATA is a product that we're not developing just UNEP side, but we have two important partners in this project, which is the University of Edinburgh, and who will do more the scientific development, methodological development of our project. And we have Earthblocks, which are developing a geospatial web-based platform built on top of Google Earth Engine to actually make this geospatial information in Google Earth Engine more accessible to our end users. Next slide, please. And so the objectives of our, and you can click once more, I think. Yes, the objectives of our project are to figure out where different types of environmental stresses are converging and climate stresses are converging, and creating kind of environmental hotspots that can translate into security hotspots, actually. So we have to overlay these kind of very biophysical stress hotspots with more socioeconomic vulnerability assessments and political vulnerability data that we can find. And the end goal is to inform our end users on climate security risks, and really dig deeper into what are potential also nature-based solutions and resilience building measures that we can apply in these hotspots. Next slide, please. So the approach we will take is called the convergence of evidence. And this is an approach which was used by the World Atlas of Desertification, made by the UN Convention to Combat Desertification and the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which just overlays a lot of different biophysical data to see where certain environmental variables are overpassing thresholds, and then counting how many of these different environmental indicators are actually surpassing stresses. But this the methodological side will of course be more further developed and further advanced by the University of Edinburgh, and also we're very open to collaborating with many more experts and then receiving input from a wide range of experts. Next slide, please. So the envisioned end product that we would want is this kind of hotspot map in a usable dashboard, in a flexible dashboard, where you could click on like a heat map of environmental stress. And once you clicked on this on a stress hotspot, let's say, you can click once more in the presentation. Then we would get a disaggregation of what that hotspot actually entails. So we get a disaggregation of the environmental stressors in that hotspot, of potential socioeconomic vulnerabilities that are overlaid with that hotspot, and of potential nature-based solutions that could be applied to this hotspot. And then you can click once. No, yeah, that's fine. We would also show the trends over time of these hotspots and so forth. So we would like to present this in an analytical dashboard where we have this kind of tailor-made analysis done for you, but which also provides a very flexible options that you can kind of customize the product to your needs. So if you're working very locally in a specific issue, you could pull in data sets that are relevant for you, and you could take out other data sets that are not relevant for you, or you could adjust the time frames that you're doing your analysis in, and so forth. And Earthblocks is a company that will help us doing this, creating this end user friendly geospatial platform. You can click once more. And Earthblocks is all built on two beliefs, so they want everyone everywhere to be able to benefit from the power of satellite data, so that people do not need to learn coding, they do not need to learn the basics of machine learning or of satellite imagery to be able to access this kind of data and information. And secondly, they want that solving problems with that satellite data should be simple and effortless, but also powerful. So building on top of the power that, for example, Google Earth Engine offers in data capacity and computational capacity. Next slide, please. So you can understand Earthblocks as a Lego for satellite data. Next slide, please. So it has this drag and drop interface where you can pull different parts of data into the working space, let's say, and you can adjust these kind of blocks of algorithm or blocks of data processing in different orders and into different details. For example, changing the area where you're analyzing this, or changing the time frames that you're analyzing this in. Next slide, please. And you can click once more. So with this project, we want to have a very user-centered co-design. So we don't want to build this kind of like index globally, but we really want to develop it together with our end users on the ground. And that gives us a couple of advantages. First of all, it makes sure that we address area-specific issues and use cases. You can click once again. It can also then more relevantly really lead to proposals for actions in those areas, and you can click once more. It also creates a possibility that we can plug and play our products into other already existing risk assessments, risk tools, and also policy support systems, so that we directly inform those, and that we're not just creating a global product where people can get information, but which is often not used on the ground to really translate into actions and into resilience building programming, for example. Next slide, please. So how our project is looking right now is that we're really working on the revision and detailing of the theoretical framework and the methods. Then in the first half of next year, we will work on a prototype for Somalia. And in the second half of next year, we will try to extend that towards the full Horn of Africa, the whole region. And concurrently, we try to see if it's possible to create other pilots also with our colleagues in Colombia, Sudan, the Mekong region, and Haiti. Next slide, yes. And so for this discussion session, what we're very interested in is like also discussing some of our challenges. So what we are searching for is still examples of how we can better inform these environmental biophysical hotspots with socioeconomic data and security risks, how we can integrate on the ground knowledge from our colleagues on the ground into this data-driven insights. How can we really contextualize these data-driven outputs that we get from our hotspot platform? How can we convey uncertainty also in these dashboards? Often we show this is a hotspot, but how sure are we about this? Which data is lacking? Which data is maybe not very accurate? And what is a good way to convey that to end users? And lastly, we're searching for good examples of how we can validate these hotspots in the field for not only accuracy, but also relevance to our end users. last slide. So please feel free to contact any of us. These are our UNEP colleagues, but you can also contact any of our colleagues in Earth Blocks or University of Edinburgh. I won't be able to join in for the whole discussion session, so please feel free to contact me on this email address afterwards.
Thank you, Marie. Really interesting. I'm not quite sure where to start with the questions. Well, one thing I have been noticing through all of the projects is there's generally a component of communicating the outputs to decision makers, we hope, to improve things, but the public in general to just, I suppose, communicate science. I've been wondering around the challenge of communicating science globally. So different cultures, different countries, languages, etc. There's a lot of diversity there to tailor messages to actually really drive that impact. It's an extra layer of the challenge of scientific, communicating science. Have you guys had any experience with that yet through your project, or do you have any thoughts on how you might manage those challenges of how best to communicate at the local scale?
Yeah, so we've mainly been collaborating with our UN colleagues at the moment, so they're very international based, and then English is of course the language used and is easy, but we are also we are aware that this platform should be multilingual and developed towards the end users in the ground. So first we will be working with Somalia, and the main people that we have been working there yet with are these political advisors to the UN political missions, let's say, and they have some experts which know a little bit about environmental problems, or they know a bit of data science, but generally they're really into political programming and diplomacy and these kind of issues. So it's a very, very different, even if it's the same language, even if it's English, it's still a very different language from moving from these scientific insights to what does this actually mean. And it's not enough to just visualize the risks and these are the problems, but that's just the first sentence they want to hear. Like, you have a problem here, but what they want to hear then is, okay, what does this mean for us in 10 years and how can we deal with it? What are the solutions? Which is not always something that science can provide. That's more needs brainstorming, needs collaboration with partners on the ground. So it's more than just a language issue, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are your sources of socioeconomic data?
That is very location specific. So migration, for example, is very important, but also livelihoods data, which is more difficult to get. Like, you can get information on water security, energy security, food security, those kind of things. So that's really like livelihood data is, I would say, on the edge between biophysical data and socioeconomic data, and then real like poverty data. Economic data is quite easy to get, but then the real social problems behind that, for example, like how cohesive is a society and these kind of things, that's much more difficult to get access to. So economic data is very well accessible, let's say. Population data is also quite okay, but more like these very soft social variables which are important towards climate and environmental security, hotspot identification. Those are the most difficult for us to get.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that challenge. Marie, thank you for presenting. It's a shame you need to leave early, but I'd encourage anybody who perhaps thinks of a question for Marie or the broader Earth Stress Monitor program to reach out to any of these people here. Marie, thank you. The next presenter is Iván González-Garzón from the Northern Arizona University, presenting on Ecological Integrity Index. Over to you, Iván.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction and the previous speakers about the really nice works. These slides meant to explain the idea that we had to develop an ecological integrity index, which the opposite interpretation is the degradation index, and is essentially trying to use this opportunity of having all the Google Earth Engine platform and all the information available about different products with temporal and spatial resolution, which is a huge amount of information that help us to solve or to test our hypothesis. So starting with the map of Colombia, which is my country, and the pilot site where I will calculate this index, I need to mention that the inputs for this analysis are the imagery from a given product, ecosystem delineation, and conserved sites as a training points. And this index is based only for a particular ecosystem, so it's not comparable among them by now. So considering the map that you can see on the bottom on the left, we have one ecosystem of Colombia that is called Los Llanos. Those are savannas. And the next graph at the right have gray curves, which means, let's say, an AVI product. And the green lines represent the conserved sites. So our hypothesis here is that the conserved places into each ecosystem have a particular signature, as a particular dynamics. And we will measure or characterize those dynamics as a proxy of integrity or the dynamics. So as you can notice, the gray lines, which are the all ecosystem pixels time series, have wider variance or a different behavior from the green curves that are the conserved locations. So from those training data, the green curves, we can derive 3 different time series analysis or curves. We will call that reference curves in our analysis. Before going on that, I would like to mention the box that is in the right side. And in that box, we can see 4 pixels and with their time series. All the 4 pixels have, one of them have the highest variance in Los Llanos, the other one the lowest variance, the other one the higher trend, and the lower trend. And in the panel at the right, you can see that all of them have the same mean. So we conclude that we need to get into the behavior inside each curve, because maybe the annual mean is not enough to characterize or to distinguish the behavior of all the process inside each pixel. So the 3 graphs at the bottom, we can see at the middle one with, well, although they have colors, but the one called typical conserved year. That curve that is in the middle, in the bottom, represents how is the expected behavior of the historical ecosystem, of the historical values of this remote sensing product in a given ecosystem. As you can notice, there are some low values which could represent El Niño, La Niña, or another global phenomena that doesn't are degradation. Those are natural cycles or natural events that maybe make a change into this behavior, but they are natural. So with this curve, we can capture that variability and consider that is a proper of the dynamic systems, that some strange behaviors which are not caused by humans. This is the long-term curve, is the number 1. The second one is in the left, that's a typical conserved year. Those are the aggregation of all the, let's say, weeks or days, months maybe, along the year, so we can expect how we can expect that a particular ecosystem behaves in the conserved conditions along the year. This is the second curve. And the third curve on the right are our conserved months, historical reference months. So we can expect that you can see in the colors, how are the Novembers, how are the Januaries. Maybe some months have transitions, as the blue colors here that are the January, February, that have the higher variance. So, but that is not bad. Those are the natural conditions of those months. And we have a not trendy, not variable months, like the drier or very wet months. We have a regular behavior, no trend, no many variation. So go to the next slide, please, Iván. So considering that we build those curves, we can compare another pixel value, another pixel with those curves. So this graph with a lot of colors there means the following. So considering that we have the long-term curve that is in the back, and we have 3 scenarios or 3 different pixels that we want to compare. The first one is the green one, which have, as you can see, a higher values on AVI, let's say, that maybe in the context of savannas could become a crop, maybe a palm crop or rice crop, which are common in Colombian llanos. The other example is the black one. We have lower values, and they are losing NDVI or AVI behavior or values. So maybe that pixel become acidic. And the third example is a gray brown one, which is behaving as the regular or expected curve. So we can say that maybe that could be a protected area or isolated pixel that is not transformed, so behaves in some way like we are expecting. So the index at the end of the day is a sum of anomalies. Maybe Amanda in the first presentation mentioned that they want to measure the anomalies, how far are the observed values from the expected reference. So maybe it's the same philosophy here. So we are planning to measure the absolute differences, which are the red lines, vertical lines. And at the end of the day, we can assume that. This is using the long-term curve, but if we move to the left, to the right, sorry, in the bottom, we can see the typical year and how these three scenarios could looks like in comparison with the annual curve. And in the plot at the bottom, a typical month, we can see how a 1 month, let's say January, behaves under those three scenarios. So we are measuring those anomalies. And we have a lot of data, spatial and temporal. We can customize the index. So we can aggregate by ecosystem, we can aggregate but spatial or only by a pixel and not all the time, but a single time reference. So let's move to the next slide. The other side of this coin is the degradation or lack of integrity. So here there's a bunch of curves, very similar among them. But what I want to mention here is that if we start from a baseline value, we can measure if our pixel of interest is getting new degradations or are recovering. So how far or how is the behavior of this pixel? Maybe we implement a restoration process there. So we expect that the restoration pixels have a pattern or behavior that can or converge with the reference value. And in the other side, we can monitor in degradations. So as if we are seeing that a pixel, in this case, the brown dashed, is behaving away from the expected value, we can try to detect that those are degradations. So those are the opportunities that we want to offer to the customers, and try to answer that kind of questions. How is the degradation? How is the pixel behaving? How is a typical winter in my ecosystem? And so on. So let's move to the next slide. So here, finally, these are examples of how this index looks like. So the bottom screenshot is about a pixel in the Amazon. So, well, sorry, the detail is not so good, but the green curve is the expected value. And the red one is the pixel that I am querying for Google Earth Engine. So you can see that these are quite different values. It's not the same. And this red pixel, these red values are representing a location that I know that have deforestation recently. So this is the kind of fears of in a product. It's a time series, and if we assume the anomalies, we can have a single value that maybe is not meaningful to compare, but we want to see that maybe the time series is more informative. The second screenshot at the bottom is a spatial and temporal index. In the left side, we have a map of Colombia in the Amazon. Maybe it's not so clear, but I draw a polygon over the deforestation frontier right now in a state called Caquetá. We have a lot of deforestation right now ongoing in Colombia. So I draw a polygon, an area that contains deforestation frontier and conserved ecosystems. And at the bottom of this this screenshot, you can see a tiny time range bar, which I pick a small time series when I want to calculate this index. And the result is that I'm take the pixel values from all the pixels in this polygon, compare with the reference curve, which is the green that is in the bottom, and zoom all those anomalies. So the result is a map, as you can see at the right. And maybe it's not so clear again, but the brighter colors are the deforested areas. So this index is able to detect deforestation right now with a simple or first examples or first experiments that we are doing with the data, and it's working. We are detecting deforestation only based on the anomalies of NDVI. But also we are having a continuous expression of the integrity loss or the integrity. So it's something that we want to investigate a little deeper, move to another ecosystems, explore another products. So to conclude my presentation, I want to mention that we are struggling a little bit because the ecosystems delineation that we are using resulting quite complex, because we have a lot of variance inside the conserved pixels in this ecosystem. So we need to try to find a smaller ecosystem delineation to try to make those reference curves quite more homogeneous. And additionally, we want to explore another products in DVI, GPP, maybe try to explore which product is the best to describe integrity loss or integrity in a particular ecosystem, the rainiest, the driest, because we have super driest and the rainiest ecosystem in the world. So maybe the same product is not working or performing well for all of them. And finally, we are trying to explore which is the way to validate those results. We have some ground data, we have official layers in Colombia, but well, there's a lot of work to do in the next year. This is part of my PhD project, so I will be super into this. So finally, Yvonne, let's go to the final slide to share my email. Feel free to contact me, and thank you for the attention here.
Iván, thank you. Very interesting. Particularly for me, I've got quite a fascination with kind of temporal segmentation techniques and trying to draw insights from that. So Earth Engine, of course, is very well suited for extracting that time series information from a stack of imagery for these temporal segmentation approaches. Even has a CCDC implementation within Earth Engine. But how have you found the performance of Earth Engine for those temporal segmentation tasks? Are you bringing those values outside of Earth Engine to R or Python packages to do that work, or are you working within Earth Engine? What's your experience there?
Well, I'm very new in Google Earth Engine, so the slides I showed you is a mix between R and a Google Earth Engine API. So I built the curves inside R. I extract the information from Google Earth Engine, calculate these curves, the 3 curves I mentioned you in R, and compare directly those particular values with a single map in Google Earth Engine, and runs super fast. So the performance, the experience have been super good. It takes maybe, it depends how much temporal data do you want to calculate, but for a considerable time series, it takes seconds to calculate. So the idea now is trying to move these slides, the screenshots that I showed you that are in R, to the Google Earth Engine application that I'm sure that will be more fast than the current process. But I'm super glad and super surprised about the performance of the Google Earth Engine API and how we can calculate a lot of spatial and temporal calculations in just a second. So I'm very happy for the opportunity to get this access.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Iván. Next, we have Glenn Moncrieff from the South African Environmental Observation Network, presenting on continuous change detection for an open ecosystem with complex natural dynamics. Again, looking at temporal segmentation, I'm very happy to be watching this. Over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Sam. So yeah, the shorter version of that long-winded title is Monitoring a Fire-Prone Ecosystem. My name is Glenn. This is collaborative work with my colleagues Jasper Slingsby, also at the South African Environmental Observation Network, and Adam Wilson at the University at Buffalo in New York. So we are the South African Environmental Observation Network is an ecological observatory distributed across South Africa, monitoring environmental change. There's sort of similar things like neon in the US, ICOS in Europe, or TERN in Australia. So we're distributed all across the country, trying to link up with other international networks. Next slide. So the system that I'm interested in and this talk is about is called the fynbos in southwestern South Africa. It's a Mediterranean climate shrubland. So you get systems like this in the Mediterranean basin in Europe, in Southern California, Western Australia, and in Chile. It's a very diverse shrubland ecosystem. The floral diversity is incredible. We have in this region, we have 9,000 plant species, 6,000 that are endemic. In those two photos on the right, each of those photos you might be looking at about 200 plant species in any one of those photos. So it's an incredibly rich and important system for biodiversity. Next slide. A part of this biodiversity and a natural part of the system is fire and natural fire cycles. So that a lot of the plants depend on fire to complete their life cycle. And here as in many of the other Mediterranean type shrublands, we understand that fire is not a disturbance, it's not a land cover change, it's a natural part of the ecosystem that is critical for the maintenance of biodiversity. And we have to incorporate that into our monitoring and our understanding of trying to monitor biodiversity and monitor change and climate change impacts in these systems. Next slide. So if we look at a bunch of plots and their NDVI through time here, what you'll see is after a fire, which is this red line, you get a big dip in the NDVI, in the greenness, and it increases through time with a seasonal fluctuation, and it kind of levels off. And so this curve you see here is really what you expect in healthy natural vegetation. This is kind of like our reference curve. There's a lot of parallels in what I'm doing to what Iván was talking about, but we're trying to adapt this to our ecosystem. So what the starting point of this project is to try and sort of develop a model that can describe this natural fire cycle in our vegetation. Next slide. So some previous work by my colleague Adam Wilson, where he's developed this curve, and essentially it's a negative exponential curve where you kind of reach an asymptote of maximum NDVI and productivity in this ecosystem, and there's some seasonal cycle to it. And this is what we expect the healthy vegetation to follow as it recovers after a fire. And if we know the age of an ecosystem, we can sort of figure out where it should be falling on that curve. And there's a couple of parameters we have to fit from the data to be able to fit this curve. So if you go to the next slide, the way we do this is that we get these NDVI time series for all the natural pixels all the pixels with natural vegetation in our region, and using environmental covariates to help, we estimate the parameters of those curves for every pixel. And because we're using these covariates, we can kind of figure out what the environmental effect is on maximum NDVI, on the recovery time, and we put this all into one hierarchical Bayesian model. So it's a statistical model that essentially allows you to kind of draw strength across your different pixels. If you've got a lot of data for one part of the region and not so much data in the other, we can still make predictions in other parts, in parts of our study area where we don't have a lot of data, as long as we have similar environments to places where we do have data, because we're essentially assuming that similar environments mean similar recovery curves. And we see that in our data, and when we sort of make predictions, and you see in the bottom right corner there, we compare some predicted and observed recovery curves, and you see that the sort of predicted fire recovery curves and their sort of probability distributions match quite well with the observations. So what we're essentially doing to use this is science that has been done before by Adam, and this project is essentially using this science to compare new observations with our predictions from these models and identify anomalies from these expected curves based on our environmental data. So how we do this in Earth Engine is essentially this that equation in the middle there, we code that in Earth Engine, and we fit the parameters outside of Earth Engine, and then we upload the fitted parameters. So every pixel has a set of parameters. We upload the fitted parameters to Earth Engine, which then allows us to make these predictions, and we compare those predictions to observations and look for anomalies and trends in vegetation over time. So next slide. And what you end up seeing is things like this. So here we are looking at an area where there's been development. I think this is a housing development, and you'll see that the observed NDVI starts to decrease relative to the probability distribution that our model predicts for the same area. Next slide. We also can detect things like the invasion of alien trees. So what you see here is around 2015, there is a drop in the NDVI, and that is captured by the model because there's been a fire, and we include the fire history data in our model. So the model expects a big drop in the NDVI, but then the NDVI recovers more rapidly and becomes more dynamic than the model expects. And that's because after the fire, this vegetation was invaded by invasive alien plants. Next slide. And similarly here, there's another fire, and our model captures that, and it predicts much lower NDVI, but subsequently we expect recovery of the vegetation, and that does not happen. It stays with very low NDVI, and here we sort of diagnose that there's been sort of decreased post-fire regrowth, and this occurred as a result of a sort of unprecedented drought that we had in this region of the world between 2015 and 2018. So you can see we can diagnose quite a lot of interesting behavior in the system, and what's really key to this is understanding that fire and these complex natural dynamics are part of the system, and they should not be identified as unnatural or as degradation. And so we need to build models that can account for that, and that's what we're trying to do here. So we have a sort of prototype Earth Engine app where we plot these anomalies spatially, and you can explore the temporal signatures of every pixel. But this isn't actually live. This isn't updating. This is a sort of once-off analysis that we've done. And as part of this project, we want to try and kind of create a system that's going to be updating continuously and potentially doing this at higher resolution. Currently, we're using MODIS 250 meter NDVI data, but we want to try and go down to the Landsat scale. Next slide. So yeah, like I said, the next steps is to automate the model fitting. The way we currently do this is that we export the data we need to fit the models from Earth Engine, and we fit them in R and Python using Bayesian methods. And then once we've got those parameters fitted, we upload those to Earth Engine and use them to make predictions against which we compare new data. So we want to try and automate that whole process so that nobody has to go and do it, and that we can have a continuous monitoring system. We want to try to do this at Landsat scale, which is not trivial because fitting Bayesian models is computationally very expensive, but there's some new ways of doing it which we would like to try out and allow us to do this at a much finer resolution. And ultimately, we want to automate the classification of these anomalies. We've already started building a training data set. This will go on beyond this GEO-GEE program, but we've already started collecting this, and this is sort of ultimately where we want to go. And the kind of final message that I want to put across here is that a lot of the continuous monitoring that we do and a lot of the algorithms we have for this are developed for forest ecosystems, for ecosystems where we've got pretty high NDVI and pretty stable NDVI other than perhaps a seasonal cycle. But most of the world is not a forest, and most of the biodiversity of the world is outside of forests. So we have to account for these complex natural dynamics and for the way that these ecosystems really work if we want to be able to monitor the entire world and not leave out all the biodiversity that's beyond the forest edge. Thank you.
Glenn, fantastic. And I really appreciate that final message as somebody that I've done most of my ecology work in the southwest of Western Australia in semi-arid areas. I very much appreciate the message that most of the world isn't a forest, certainly not the parts I've been working in. So I've actually got a lot of questions I'm going to have to follow up with you sometime in the next few weeks. But firstly, can Can you explain the difference between your model and some other temporal modelling approaches, such as BFAST or CCDC Land Trender? And I know there's been some new publications just recently as well on the topic. How does your approach to the temporal modelling vary from those?
So I guess all of them differ in the way that the sort of exact details of the statistical way that they are identifying breakpoints and anomalies. But I think the major point that we're trying to do differently is a lot of these methods will look at the information in a single pixel and try to understand the expected behavior of that pixel based on that pixel's past. And without looking at nearby pixels or environmentally similar pixels. And that makes a lot of sense, because computationally it's very hard to fit a model now for every pixel, which includes all the information from a whole bunch of other pixels. So I think that's probably one of the best reasons to not do what we're doing. But it certainly helps you to make much better predictions when you say, well, if I'm looking at my pixel and I know the vegetation and the rainfall and the soil and the temperature, I can be pretty sure that information in another pixel, either next door or potentially even far away, that has all of that same environment, that same vegetation, is going to help me make a prediction in this pixel, particularly if you're working with an area that's got sparse data or your record only goes back so many years. And so if you include data in your model from on environmental covariates or sort of spatially nearby pixels, you get much better predictions. It makes it much harder to fit the model computationally, but we're sort of getting to a place where this is possible, and the computational power with the help of Google Earth Engine, for example, is there to do this. So that's the main difference, I think.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's really insightful. It does make complete sense, but I can see where the compute is going to be challenging. But I suppose that's one of the great things in the age we live in. Computational power is increasing continuously, so hopefully it's not long before we can all attempt similar processes. Glenn, thanks a lot. I look forward to asking you some more questions soon. But our next presenter is Elkin Noguera Urbano from the Humboldt Institute in Colombia, presenting on the BioModelos project. Over to you, Elkin.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much for this invitation. Next, please. Well, this is BioModelos. BioModelos is a tool from Colombia, and we are proposing species distribution models for making decisions in the country. Our premise is the better models with the support from experts. Next, please. BioModelos currently is a web application that provides free and open access to species distribution models and maps through collaborative mapping of species by using statistical methods and learning and other to obtain the best models. Next, please. BioModelos is a tool that seeks to develop species distribution linking to GEO-GEE. BioModelos is a tool linked to GEO-GEE in Colombia and BON Colombia. Next, please. BioModelos in this moment is integrated with another tool called Wallace to improve the models for making decisions in BON. Next, please. Next. We are using free and open software. We use the complete code of our developments is available on GitHub. Next, please. We want to integrate the data available on the net, for example, Biodiversity Colombia, to another data available in G using the technology of Google. We think that the integration of record of the species with sensing that remote data from GEE is the best way to improve the monitoring of this species distribution. Next, please. We have a big background supported by the experts in Colombia. The experts refine and cure the models to generate the best species distribution maps to making decisions in Colombia. Next, please. Currently, we are using the traditional bioclimatic variables. We are using working to obtain the maps at the 1 kilometer of pixel, but we want increase the grain of the species distribution models. With the GEE, we are proposing the obtain models at the with the better grain possible. Yeah. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. We want the monitoring the species. Yeah. We using these technologies to because we think that the assuming the better species distribution models, we can to identify the best pattern of species. The counter required monitoring the richness of the species. Thus, we think that providing the best models, we can obtain the richness map, more realistic richness map. Thank you. And thus reduce the gaps of knowledge about the distribution of the species. Next, please. We have a lot of groups in BioModelos, birds, mammals, butterflies, and other groups. And we think that the GEE offers the new data to improve the models for these groups. Next, please. Next. The capacities of the BioModelos is supported in the experts. We want obtain the models and with the help of the experts, refine the models to provide the best models at the stakeholders. Next, please. We are following this workflow to obtain the models. We are working as a social network, yeah, to integrate the experience of the experts, but our backbone in BioModelos is the running the models using mathematical algorithms to obtain the models. In this part of distribution modeling, we are thinking to use GEE technologies to improve the models. Next, please. Next, please. This is a geographical viewer of BioModelos. In this project, we want improve our app using the tools at Google. Yeah, Google offers a new way to increase the apps from GEE. Yeah, and we want to integrate the app from GEE with our visor too. Next, please. This is the workflow that we are using to integrate the information from GEE. In the past semester, we were cleaning data to integrate with the GEE information in the next months. This is the system that we are thinking to integrate the GEE information. We are processing the information in the Google Cloud using the machine learning algorithms. We make some tests with using the the maxing in G and the BRT in G, and we have some good results. Yeah, we want obtain these models to monitoring the species and to identify the trajectories in a society with the loss of the forest too. Next, please. The results of these projects will be connected with another system in the country. Our idea is move the information, to archive a dynamic indicator of change in the geographic distribution of species, with the purpose of generating alert of biodiversity losses. That is to visualize trajectories of the distributions, and generate information to support national system. For example, for the evaluation of patterns of species richness, of the evaluation of the representativeness of species and natural reserves in the country, and another use in Colombia and the continent. Next, please. This is a numbers of the use of BioModelos. We want to use the models of using G to improve the evaluations of threats of species in Colombia. Yeah. Next, please. And improve the interoperability of BioModelos to complete the Atlas of Biodiversity in Colombia. We want to integrate the advantage of G, such as big process and store data capacities, to improve BioModelos and thus contribute to the national and global monitoring systems. Next, please. In synthesis, we want to provide tools to develop and improve species maps collaboratively, facilitates the communication among experts, increasing communication and collaboration, provides tools to allow the publication of species distribution models by another researchers, allows access to the results of mapping exercises openly and freely. We are following the open science in our project. It's an important point in the Humboldt Institute. And all web developments and design scripts in G and BioModelos are open source and available in GitHub. Next, please. Thank you. Thank you for this space and for your collaboration.
Elkin, thank you. Very interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to start with one question I had though. How are you preparing and importing the species distribution data? I think this is a task that many people will want to undertake through the GEO program, is to bring in other types of spatial data which may or may not be explicitly spatial. So I just wanted to understand your experience in preparing and cleaning and making species distribution data consistent.
The species distribution have big problems, with essential with the quality of the records. I don't know, maybe the temporal time frame in which were collected, for example, But in the Humboldt Institute, we are collecting data from the using CAMTRAMS, and we are using records available in eBirs, for example, from citizen science. With this strategy, we are improving the quality of the data, and then with the GEE data, for example, the MODIS information data available at on G, we think that it's possible merge this information to improve the models at fine scale. Yeah, we have some pilots using models information, and the differences between the models using 1 kilometer and 50,000 meters is nice. The GEE offers a new way to improve the models, the ecological niche models, and this information will be powerful to increase our capacity to monitoring species in Colombia and in other countries. We hope that these systems with this will be ending could be used to be replicated in other countries to mapping the species and monitoring the species. Yeah.
Excellent. Elkin, thank you. I look forward to talking to you. Hopefully we have enough time for a bit of panel discussion. Our final presenter is Stef Lhermitte from the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, presenting on ice shelf monitoring. Over to you, Stef.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so welcome. I'm going to take you to a completely different environment. We are not going to look at vegetation at all. And I'm going to present our project where we're going to monitor ice shelves within the Earth Engine. So this project is led by me and Bert Wouters, my colleague, which actually mirrors a larger scientific project, or actually a very large scientific project that is funded by the Dutch Science Foundation. Where we're going to do the science, and in this GE project, we're actually going to bring our results also to the community. So perhaps a bit of background on ice shelves. Yes, you can go to the next slide, Yvonne. So ice shelves, they are the floating parts that surround 75% of the coast of Antarctica. So it's land ice that is floating over the ocean. And they're often called the gatekeepers because these ice shelves, they basically slow down the ice that comes behind it. You can see it a bit as a slow car in traffic that keeps the ice behind it slowing down. And so they kind of have an important role on potential sea level rise. Now these ice shelves, they melt. They melt from the top due to atmospheric warming, and they melt from the bottom due to warm ocean water. And in a changing climate, we can expect that these ice shelves potentially might collapse either due to increased surface melt or due to increased ocean melt, which might have a very important impact on future sea level rise. Yes, next slide, please. And to illustrate a bit what such an impact could be, I show you here this most iconic example, perhaps, which is a MODIS image of Larsen B ice shelf. So it's on the Antarctic Peninsula, and it's from 2002. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you kind of a very short sequence of a couple of weeks where actually you see this ice shelf collapsing on a very short time scale. And also, if you look well on this picture, you see all these blue dots on the white background. These are surface lakes, and these lakes, they kind of instantly initiated a kind of a hydrofracturing, and so basically the ice shelf collapsed very quickly. If you can kind of flip through the next slides where you actually see on a very short time scale. Yes, next one, you see that the ice shelf breaks off further. Here, all the ice is already gone, and a couple of weeks later, this entire ice shelf is gone, which later had a very important impact on sea level rise. Now, this collapse, this hydrofracturing, this is a small-scale process. This is drainage of individual lakes, sometimes of a couple of kilometers wide, with large impacts. And so we have surface processes, we have basal processes on the back and on the bottom, and we have rifting, for example, which all and crevasses, which all are actually very small-scale processes that could have a very large global impact on sea level rise. And so within this project, we're actually gonna look at all these processes by using the recent availability of high-resolution satellite images and kind of also the advances in modeling. So we actually are getting able to better understand these small-scale processes. And we see three challenges. Yes, next slide, please. which we actually need to solve if we want to get better estimates of future sea level rise. One of them is better understand what is the role of this water on the ice shelf or within the ice shelf, so the surface processes. Second one is what is the role of the basal processes, so the ocean melting the ice shelves from below. And the third one, what is the role of crevasses and mechanical weakening and damage? And we're actually going to look at all these processes in the scientific project, and so also within the Earth Engine project. Yes, next slide, please. So, for example, for surface melting, we're going to use both the Landsat Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-1 archive to get a better understanding of where is the water and where does it go. If you look at this image over Emery Ice Shelf, you clearly can identify these lakes, and they also move. By using Sentinel-1 SAR backscatter, we can also map the melt. So next slide, please. So we already have built some Earth Engine apps that actually already allow us to look in near real time to where the melt is with unprecedented spatial resolution and make these melt maps. So these are melt fractions, which are derived from time series. Yes, next slide, please. Because melting actually results in a strong reduction in the backscatter. So what we do is using state-of-the-art technologies, which at the moment for identifying melt, we basically look at the contrast between the backscatter in winter and the backscatter, and if there's a strong decrease as a result of melt, we map it as melt. And one of the challenges we face here is how do we do it efficiently in the Earth Engine, because all of these, because this change is very much dependent on which orbit it is, actually on which angle the SAR satellite is looking at the surface. So it works operationally at the moment, but there's still some fine-tuning to be done. Next slide, please. A second process we're going to look at is how does these ice shelves melt from below? How is the ocean is actually melting from below? And again, these are very often fine-scale processes. These are sometimes channels, a kilometer wide, that eat the ice shelf away from below. And so in this context, we're currently focusing on using the REMA model. So for Antarctica, we have these very high resolution terrain models, either 2 meter or 8 meter of spatial resolution, which are acquired from stereographic images of a set of commercial satellites. And we're going to look at changes there. So again, next slide, please. So if you look at the REMA data over such an ice shelf, it more or less looks like this. So you see that it has a very detailed elevation profile where you potentially even can also see these individual channels appearing and these individual crevasses. And now we're kind of subtracting these elevation profiles. Yes, next slide, please, to understand elevation changes. So we basically subtract the individual elevation models, and as such we can track over time, as you see in this regression plot, where the melt is occurring, where it is actually thickening, for example, to deposition of ice. One of the challenges we face here is that ice moves. So all these things have to be done in a Lagrangian framework. So we actually have to account that all of these images are taking on different time steps. So before subtracting individual terrain models, we basically have to move them along with the velocity of the ice before we can subtract them. Currently, we have an operational thing that can do this, but we still very often run into memory problems that need to be solved. And then the third process, next slide, please, is the role of damage. All of these ice shelves, they're very often crevassed, they have rifts, they have all types of damage, very often in their shear zones. As you can see on this satellite image, Sentinel-2 satellite image of Thwaites Glacier, you see that these ice shelves, these are not very nice wide features. They are full of these individual rifts and crevasses and open pieces. And they can have an important impact. Again, next slide, please. If you make a time series over such, so if you look at the video, which shows you the evolution, in this case over Pine Island, first of all, you see the movement, but you also see that in these shear zones, we see the development of individual rifts that change over time, that grow, and that are being advected, and that have a strong impact of how much buttressing these ice shelves can actually do. So in the third sub-project, we're going to look at how can we use image detection techniques or image recognition techniques to determine these cracks and crevasses and damage tools. On one hand, it's based on standard image processing techniques, like using edge detectors. On the other hand, we're looking into how can we use machine learning to actually detect these damages in a more intelligent way. Yes, next slide, please. And so basically, our goal now is to bring these three scientific goals together and really bridge it towards getting our scientific work also ready for the community, the glaciological community, but also the wider community that might have an interest in looking at nice Antarctic satellite pictures. I think the main problems or the main challenges we're going to face, I think our team has already a wide experience in using the Google Earth Engine. Also, our students have. So I think we're kind of on the side of the more advanced users, but we still often run into problems of having memory limits of the Earth Engine, specifically because we're running these Sentinel, Landsat, and REMA data sets on a very large continent, but at their native resolution. So scale is definitely a problem there. We need to look at how they change over time. We need to take into account that actually ice moves. So some things need to be calculated in a Lagrangian framework. And of course, we're kind of very much interested in how we can improve the newest machine learning techniques into our project. And then the last one is perhaps not a challenge, but really a goal, is that we want to also put this into a nice app. So it really brings our results, makes our results available for the community. And with that, next slide, please. I would like to thank you. And of course, if you would have any questions that cannot be solved now, you're always more than welcome to contact me.
Stef, thank you. Excellent presentation. I love the images and particularly that video. And I noted a few comments of other people congratulating you on that video. So well done. I'm becoming conscious of the time, but I do want to ask you about the data sources you were using. So you mentioned a number. I assume everybody got those. But is ISAT2 data being used by your project?
So in the scientific data, we are going to, and the scientific project, we are going to use it. Because at height changes, of course, there's nothing that measures height as accurately as ISAT2 does. At the moment, within the Earth Engine, I think we still are figuring out, because the ISAT data is not available within the Earth Engine. If it's at some point really a goal to bring the ISAT data, or perhaps only the derived products towards the community. But the PhD students that are going to work on this ice shelf thinning, they're definitely going to process ISAT data. Yes. And I see there's a question from Douglas. The same for Quaresat. So really, if we look at elevation changes, it's going to be all altimeters. Bert Wouters, my colleague, he's the altimeter expert in our team. And because the only disadvantage at this moment is that we don't have them in the Earth Engine yet, or we never will have them. And the REMA data, they are there. So that's already something we could build up to this point.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Yvonne, do you want to bring the panel back? I've let the time slip. I think I failed in my hosting duties somewhat, in that we're approaching the end and we have not had much of a panel discussion yet. So I'm hoping I'm fine to run over time a little bit. If anybody has to drop out, feel free to drop out. Firstly, I want to start off with a simple question and move around the room. And I think I'll start with you, Stef. If there was one thing you could change about Earth Engine, what would it be? If you could add a feature, add a data set, change something, what would you change?
I would very much like to get rid of the engine capacity problem or a memory exceedings problem. That would be my, I would not mind having even a paid feature, and I also don't understand that everybody needs to do everything on the large scale. I think one of the strengths is the pyramid profile. So we're basically, you can do everything on a global scale, but the only thing that actually changes is the scale level. But the problem we face in our problem is that in the end, we want to do everything on the native scale. And that's something I would like to see changed. And I think even within our project, we would not mind paying for it. But at the moment, I don't see that happening yet.
Okay, thank you. Iván, would you like to comment on that question? What would you change about Earth Engine if you could?
Well, I'm not completely sure, since most of my effort have been understanding the data sets, so it will not be fair from my side try to change something that I have explored yet. So I will be biased. Yes, I feel like I have a lot of capacities that maybe I haven't explored completely to assess this question. But right now, everything looks super good. Maybe in 1 year I could answer this question.
Okay, excellent. Glenn, what would you change about Earth Engine if you could?
I think, like Stef said, obviously everyone wants more memory and more, like, why is my memory, give me more? It's run, that's like the first thing you say when memory exceeded. It's like, well, just give me more, right? And obviously that's not possible, and sometimes it's happening because of something you do. But even just a bit more transparency in that, and it says, you've hit your memory limit of X gigabytes, and you can be like, oh, I'm using 2 terabytes of memory. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. And it's, so a little bit, even without having to actually change anything, to make it a bit more transparent, because that helps you to understand like why things are falling over. And then, of course, going forward, Google can commercialize that and say, pay some money and you can increase that memory allocation. But if it's not transparent, you can't quite figure out, it's harder to debug, actually.
Yes, I would agree.
Perhaps one point to mention is that in our case, running it with the profiler option. So if you run with profiler, you most of the time get a relatively good insight of where the memory bug is coming from. But even then, at some point, you run into. I agree that transparency would be a bit more transparency would be a big asset.
Yes, absolutely. Amanda, do you have a comment on what you would like to see changed about Earth Engine if you could?
I mean, really, the memory issues hits the nail on the head for me. With us trying to do global products and scale things up, and we all want to be at the native resolution of the products that we're using also. In terms of the communication of the errors, that would be helpful, but more than anything too, a lot of times what happens is we end up exporting or trying to export because we can't do the calculations that we want to do in Google Earth Engine. So we have to export it and do it in our own frameworks. And I would much rather and prefer to keep it all in Google Earth Engine. However, then when we want to export those maps at the end, our final products, a lot of times the way that it exports is also incredibly difficult because you have to zip it back up together and open it in a different program, and so having some sort of continuity with respect to the framework and the format of how things are exported would also be helpful for me.
Yes, excellent. And Elkin, what would you change in Earth Engine if you could?
Yeah, maybe the big change in my case, is the interconnection with another repositories of records of biodiversity. I think that GEE is a good tool to integrate the geographic information, but we need to integrate data from species, for example. Our principal challenge is integrate, for example, GBIF information with GEE, because the processing and the capacities of memory of GEE is enormous. We have a a lot system in our hands, but to mobilize the records to GEE is so hard. We are loading the records, but using the traditional scripts in GEE, but and is necessary an interconnection with these systems.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And one last question from one of the attendees. I promised I'd ask questions put in the comments. So I think this would relate to Iván and Glenn mostly. Are analysis-ready data used in either of the time series-based projects? If yes, can they be produced entirely in Google Earth Engine? I guess that's the gist of the question. What are the so I suppose for Iván and Glenn, what are those core data sets you're using? Is that just the surface reflectance product, or are you doing additional processing to I suppose tighten up those surface reflectance values?
So we're just using the derived vegetation indices that are I can't remember what the code is. So we're not even using the surface reflectance. It's sort of like even a higher level product. We're just using the NDVI from Modus, and there are so that's quite heavily processed already, and I would say analysis ready in that regard. That we're not having to do any sort of corrections to the data to apply our model, but there's also we don't have to do it on NDVI. We could do it on the raw bands themselves. We could do it on some derived biomass measure. It depends. Just what we're interested in is the pattern more so than the absolute values of anything, actually. So what you think it's just a matter of what you think is the most honest reflection of the pattern. Like the NDVI we look at saturates, and we know that the vegetation biomass increases beyond the saturation point, even in the shrublands we work in. But we're not so bothered by that, because those aren't the dynamics we're interested in. We're actually interested in the earlier part of the curve before the saturation. So then the other data sets we use in terms of producing something that's operational and that people can view a live application and interact with the data live. It is very important to have data, to use data that's being ingested into Google automatically. It's a massive pain to build some system that depends on you regularly uploading data to Earth Engine in order for the Earth Engine app to make up-to-date predictions. So it's kind of intelligent, if you want to build something that's going to be operational out of Earth Engine, to build it based on data that's already in Earth Engine from the start, because you're just going to make your life a pain if you want to continuously be uploading data to Earth Engine.
Yeah, absolutely. Iván, that your experience as well?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with Glenn. And essentially, as we are trying to measure or characterize different ecosystems, we need to explore another products, because as Glenn, we are using NDVI right now. And something that came up always in the discussion with my professors, my committee, my advisors, is, okay, how is the quality process inside your pipeline? And right now is none, but it's something that we want to explore, essentially to incorporate and be sure that we are using the highest quality data. Yep. But it's a challenge. I don't know how much of the information that I'm using right now is not usable in the quality terms, but it's an answer that unfortunately I can't answer right now. I hope in a couple of months I will have the answer.
Okay, Excellent, thank you. And I think one final comment, given that we, I think, all had similar suggestions about what we'd love to see in Earth Engine, I thought it's only fair to allow Noel a right of reply, but probably more to the point to explain to us and everybody listening, the perspective from the engineering side of Earth Engine around our comments about just give us more power. Noel.
In 30 seconds, yeah, great, thanks. So I feel your pain with the memory exceeded problems. The good news for me is that I wrote a lot of those systems, so I know that if you put them together just right, you can make it work, but that doesn't help you. It's not simply a matter of give me more memory, because you're actually running in a distributed environment over many, many, many machines. And each one of those machines has a 2 gig or a 4 gig or a 20 gig limit. Collectively, you're able to muster, a couple hundred terabytes of memory, but telling you that you exceeded 100 terabytes of memory doesn't really help you at all. It's that one machine that had a stack slightly larger than the machine could handle that tends to get you most of the time. So the main limiting factor is almost always stack depth. So if you're trying to put together lots and lots of images, any one machine working on any one tile at a particular time has to load up all those tiles that it's working on, and that's where you typically hit your memory limits. Some things that you might not know about that might help is there's a function called retile, which will cause you to use a smaller tile, and often that will get you around a memory limit. Using it is tricky. It works the same way as reproject. So if you know what to do and what not to do with reproject, retile works out the same way. But essentially stick it on the last bit of your computation, and all the tiles from the back to the front end up smaller. So that might get you around some of your memory limits. The other one is that when you're doing reductions and they run out of memory, there's a tile scale option on a lot of the reducer wrapper functions, like reduce bands or something like that, reduce the image collection. So again, we've got millions of machines. Every one of those machines is actually pretty small and has roughly a 2 gig limit. So you need to make any one small piece fit inside the 2 gig. Especially for Stef, who's trying to use whole images and shift them around, that gets really tricky. You might just be out of luck, but the rest of the people doing time series analysis, often the retile or tile scale will get you over that hump.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm becoming very conscious of the time, so I think now's the time to wrap it up. So on behalf of everybody that is listening right now and everybody else that will eventually see, hopefully, this video on YouTube, thank you for your time. Thank you for your great presentations. Most of all, thank you for committing your time to the projects you're working on and the impacts that you are aiming to have. It's really a pleasure to work with all of you guys. So the recording of this meetup will be made public on YouTube soon. Currently it's unlisted, so the links that have been sent around to everybody will work if you want to share it with colleagues, etc. But also look out for, I suppose, a reminder of that link in your inbox and also on social media channels. Please do share it with your colleagues. And finally, thank you, everybody who is watching this live. There are 3 more virtual meetups that you are more than welcome to join as well. So these are next week, and we're going to discuss water quality, land degradation, and then finally agriculture and poverty alleviation. We hope you can all join us then. Thank you and goodbye.